Welcome back to the ASN Dad Chat. We're a podcast and community dedicated to making sure no ASN dad in Scotland has to walk this path alone.
Our goal is simple: real talk, real honesty, and sharing our own experiences to help you navigate the system. Whether you're in our meetup group already or just finding us now, you've got a seat at the table.
And just a reminder, we aren't experts, we're just dads, and this is just experiences and opinions, not medical advice and not legal advice. Then let's go on with the chat today.
Hello and welcome back to ASN Dad Chat. We're back for episode 5 and I'm joined by Sam.
Hello.
And Glyn.
Hello.
So this week what we're looking to talk about is the diagnostic journey, kind of road to autism diagnosis, whatever you would like to call it. We're just going to try to get into the details of the early signs that we've seen as parents, the journey we had to get in the actual diagnosis, what actually happened in the diagnosis, and kind of what was happening after that point. I think it's a big topic that everyone will find kind of useful and can relate to.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of part and parcel with any ASN parent. It's something that you've either dealt with previously or you're going to come across. I think, was it talking before this? I know I've recently just had my stepdaughter. She's just had her autism diagnosis, and I know, was it the first few episodes I was saying, I was like, I don't have a clue about the diagnostic journey, I've not been on it. Now I have.
You're the most experienced one now.
Yeah, it's good you've got that as well now. Obviously, like you've got it with your eldest child, and obviously you've gone through that in ways, but now you've had it firsthand, similar to other parents, and obviously it's very fresh for you. For myself, Andy, it's been a while, obviously. So we said about it before. I've had to go back and speak to Jade. You said you spoke to Cheryl, and we had to go back and kind of like timeline how it's all been for us. Yeah,
everything can be a bit of a blur of what happened at what age. So,
it's such an impactful a thing that happens, and I know we talked about it in like the actual chat, and I think it was very much a sense of relief, that was coming across, because I think for my stepdaughter, she's she presents very differently to my oldest. She's very verbal, she's very literal, so kind of whatever comes into her head or she hears, she very much she believes. What was it? She was at school. She was talking about somebody who had came over to her and was calling her a crybaby, and we turned around and went, well, what happened? What did you say? And she was like, I just cried. And it's just that literal when she comes out with it, and me and my partner, we were trying not to buckle. She says things sometimes, and I'm like, oh my lord,
totally dead.
So it was one of those that when it came round to the actual assessment, I think we were just like, right, I hope that doesn't get foreshadowed, but I've known her since she was about one and a half when she started her journey. So I've been quite fortunate where, I wasn't really there. The diagnosis came from my oldest when I think he was 4, I want to say, but I met him when he was about 4.5. So he had already had his diagnosis at that stage, whereas now I've actually been present in my stepdaughter's journey.
Yep.
For me, it's for most people, they come to it through their first kids. I was exposed to ASN kids quite young. I had a cousin who had autism, along with other diagnoses. A couple of years younger than me. He's in his 30s or so now. Made his own life for himself, but in a young age, I didn't really understand what was going on. Obviously, I was told, similar to other kids, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. Obviously, you just need to be careful with what you say and how you go about things. And obviously, if you're worried or you're unsure, you'd have to try to speak to an adult about it. But you don't really, at that age, can't really comprehend it all. But I think that helped me see the early signs with Elijah. We got Elijah's diagnosis during COVID. So I think he was about 2 when he first got his diagnosis, and it was just it was small things, and it's small things from a young age, and like people just would say that he was he would get there. Obviously, you just have to give it time, but it was similar. It was just things like it took him a little bit longer to walk, didn't acknowledge his name, the usual like first signs of his speech, sleep. Like sleep was terrible for Elijah, always has been. He had speech before he got to 2, and he had some comprehensive language. Obviously, so he could say "mom," "dad," like "nana," and he'd sing. There's a video that my mother-in-law is very fond of. He's at a window, like singing "Rain, Rain, Go Away." But it's heartbreaking for my wife because that video was taken just before he essentially lost his speech.
Did he regress at that stage?
That's where he'd regressed, yeah. So we'd spoken to our health visitor a couple of times, and she was like, "I'll come and do a visit." And within like half an hour of being there, she goes, "Yeah, you just need to get in. We need to get him assessed." We went for assessment down in the Gorbals. So I'm not sure whereabouts you would have gone for yours.
We were the same.
And at that time, obviously, because it was still during COVID, only one parent could go in at a time. So I went in because it was still quite hard for Jade at the time. Especially with the idea that she'd have to go in herself. If anything happened, she wouldn't be able to control the situation. So we went into the room, spoke to the doctor. Obviously, Elijah just wanted to play while he was in there, and she was trying to assess him. It just upset him, frustrated him, obviously, because she was trying to poke and prod and try and get his attention with things, and it just wasn't a great experience. But she agreed that there was signs of autism there, and we'd gone from there to... We didn't get the diagnosis there and then. We still had to go along the lines of doing things like speech and language, and a couple of more assessments. We went for testing, same as yourself did. Ours came up as inconclusive, which was a pain at the time, obviously, because we could see obviously there were signs. We were in nursery at the time, and it was a private nursery, and Elijah actually struggled within the nursery. Because I'm not going to badmouth the place, but they essentially told us that they couldn't look after a child of Elijah's needs.
It's fairly common. I think, and certainly something with my oldest's school. It was something that they were trying to fight against saying that, but it's difficult.
Yeah, I think it was harder because the girls in there wanted to learn, but the owner of the nursery just had no interest. So we'd left the nursery, and we were fortunate enough to find another nursery very close to us very quickly. And that nursery was amazing. It's the same one that Noah goes to now, because we built such a good rapport with the girls. Obviously, as soon as we told them that Noah was coming, they were like, "He's coming here, right?" So we're like, "Yeah, sure, he's coming there." And it was at that nursery that Elijah flourished. He had a one-to-one care with one of the girls in there, and she just helped him so much. And I think if it hadn't been for us going to that nursery, I think Elijah wouldn't have learned as much as he had done, and he wouldn't have continued to grow his speech or because obviously we did our best, but there's only so much we know as parents that we can do. Obviously, there has to be some external for that as well.
Yeah, I think that once you get them into somewhere that they can fit in, that they can thrive, it's massive for them, sort of thing. That they're in an environment that they can actually be comfortable in, and they can try and learn the way that's best for them. Is one of the main things. I mean, in terms of Ashton, his was kind of different, sort of thing. There's some early signs with Ashton when he was younger that he had this constant hum when he was reading, sort of thing. That was always just kind of like, what is that? It's a bit different, sort of thing. Like this constant humming, sort of thing. He would always be leading us by the hand. He didn't have any sort of gestures or anything, so he wouldn't clap, he wouldn't point, which I had no idea that was even a thing that they were supposed to have hit, sort of thing. But milestone wise, like Ashton met all of his. Like he was crawling at 6 months, walking at 11 months. He had speech, he could say hi, bye, mum, dad, had eye contact and everything, so we had zero concerns at all in terms of autism. We always thought that he had a lot of medical issues because he was always ill, he was always in hospital, and then also the fact that my oldest niece is autistic, and comparing the two of them are completely different. Even now they're completely different there. So at that point, autism just wasn't on our radar at all, because we were like, Ashton is nothing like her. That just wasn't there. So we had essentially a full list of things that we thought was affecting Ashton. It was more in terms of, it was kind of smaller things, like he would be watching the TV upside down. He'd be like hanging off the couch watching TV upside down. He'd be head banging. So he'd just be sitting watching TV, just banging his head off the wall. And then kind of slowly but surely that hum turned into the scream that we all know and love today. But it did take a while though. If in terms of the kind of behaviour stuff, and it was a good while before autism even came into the kind of equation at all. He was a lot of kind of behavioural issues. That was the head banging was getting worse. He would just be going down on the floor and just banging his head off the floor, going for the wall, going for the corner of the wall. So it was really, really upsetting just to watch him really upset. But in our heads, it was, we thought he had something medically hurting him, sort of thing, that we thought there was a pain, we need to get that sorted. And it was at a point where Cheryl just kind of broke down and took him to the GP when I was at work. And at that point, Ashton was sitting in front of her, just banging his head off the floor. Cheryl had got a 2-page list of all the different kind of symptoms that we thought Ashton had. Again, still all medical things, the different issues we thought it could be. Still none of them autism, completely off the radar. And the GP referred us to the community paediatrician, a medical paediatrician, and ENT, just to check. I think that was to check his hearing, which again is quite common, that these sort of things can be hearing problems. He went to the medical paediatrician, and the full time they just kept saying, no, I think it's behavioural. And we're kind of like, they keep saying behavioural, which turns out I think that's just our kind of code word for autism sort of thing. They checked ENT, all absolutely fine. And it wasn't until we had the kind of call with the community paediatrician on the phone, and she was asking us kind of a bunch of questions. Does he do this? Does he do this? Does he do this? And then it was at the end of the call, she was like, well, I'm 90% sure that he's got autism. And that was the first time we were kind of got the kind of shock of, oh my God, like, I hadn't thought about that. Like, and I think it's just that we were, until you're kind of in that world, you've no idea what autism is, sort of thing. Like, as soon as I've seen my niece, I'm like, well, that's autism. Whereas now, obviously, the amount of kids that we see are yeah, it just shows you it's a kind of a whole different world. I don't know about you, Sam, in terms of, obviously it's a lot more kind of fresh for you. What kind of early signs you had seen with your...
Yeah, I think so. At the moment, I've seen a lot in my stepdaughter. I've also seen a lot in my son. So my son, he's 3.5. He was delayed in a lot of his milestones, like crawling wise, walking. It took him until he was about 1.5. He then, at the back end of one, he had multiple surgeries on his throat. He was born with a floppy larynx, which then, once they investigated that and they done the surgery to close it up, they identified a laryngeal cleft, which is like a kind of hole that leads down, like past the voice box, down into the lungs, pretty much. Because he was getting sick all the time, constantly getting like kind of bronchiolitis, that sort of stuff, and we were in and out of the hospital constantly. So we kind of, I think for us, we looked at it and went, well, we need to give him a bit of slack on that, because it's going to be hard for him to meet his milestones with all of these things going on. But as time's progressed, he certainly, like once he started going to nursery, there was early signs in the sense that he would be trying to put a lot of different things in his mouth. He would he would really kind of, he wouldn't really parallel play. He would really focus on what he was doing, and everybody else around him was just an extension. Luckily, he's in the biggest room now, and we've just got a plan put in place for him. It's called, I believe it's called the Up and Away, which is basically targeting improving his speech. He's certainly came a long way in terms of his speech. He's getting a lot more phrases, and his counting's really good. We've noticed that as well recently. he's starting to identify colours, so he's making good progress. It's one of those though that is very much, we've had those conversations with health visitors, with the GP, and we've sat there and there's been like, listen, with our oldest having autism, with our stepdaughter, she was looking to have autism. We've recently obviously had her diagnosis. She has autism, and with how his kind of speech and language delay was and the stage he is at in his development, they were like, listen, it could very much be the same. So we're still very early on in that journey with our youngest, but our stepdaughter, she got her diagnosis, I want to say it's probably about a week or so ago, and I think for us, the early signs, she wasn't that verbal up until she was about 1.5, 2. It took her a wee while, but once she got a lot of language, it flourished. But it seemed that her emotionally, she really struggled. She really struggles with transitions. So, like in school or in nursery, when they would move from one thing to another, it would be a complete meltdown.
Mm-hmm.
There just wasn't that process of, right, I can leave this until tomorrow, or I can do something, I can maybe come back to this. It was, why is this changing,
Mm-hmm.
And now, there's like visual timers and stuff like that really help her, but she's very literal, and she really kind of struggles to understand like sarcasm and stuff like that, which is ironic, because my partner, she's probably the most sarcastic person I know. So sometimes we have to kind of rein ourselves in and go, she's not going to understand that. But I think we were both a wee bit apprehensive about the assessment. So, just like you were saying there, Glyn, you didn't get the results right away. So my stepdaughter, she had her assessment, and then later on that day we got the call to kind of discuss it. So I didn't actually know that you don't get the results on that day. It's quite interesting. But they basically phoned us up and were like, listen, she very much has autism. This is what we observed during like the activities. She was playing with different things. She was connecting different toys to different different, like concocting a story almost with the select toys, and she was very much featuring the person who was assessing her in the story, but she was kind of dictating what the story was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
She was very much just telling the person, this is what you're going to do, and there was no kind of, there was a kind of a lack of a kind of social imagination of that other person's input and what that other person might want to do. And those were some of the points that came out. Was she has like a kind of Scottish American twang to her voice. She's picked up a lot of kind of American mannerisms through YouTube and like a lot of kind of like tablet things that she plays or she watches, and getting her to like process things. Like she very much, anytime we're talking about money, she refers to it as dollars.
Right.
So we don't kind of turn around and go, no, it's not that. We just kind of go, oh, you mean pounds?
Yeah.
And that can be a bit of a struggle for her. But I think for us, we were a wee bit worried that just because she is so verbal and because you can have an active conversation, we were a wee bit worried that a lot of her mannerisms and behaviours were going to get overlooked. But when we got that, and to their credit, they were so thorough of the examination, and I think both of us were very relieved that that diagnosis came through, and now she's going to be able to get a bit more help and support in school and other areas.
Well, that's good.
It's a luxury as well, obviously, that you've had it later than you have in many ways. Like, I know for Elijah that one of the reasons why they wouldn't give him his diagnosis so early was because he was so young. Like they're very reluctant to diagnose kids under a certain age because it could just be development issues.
Absolutely.
And I remember that us being told that at the beginning of it. It's like, oh, it just could be something that he's working on. Like, he might just be like, he's just developing XYZ. And I'm like, no, like, there's something wrong here. Like, you need to acknowledge that.
We don't need to just wait and see it out.
Yeah, you don't need to just wait and see. But again, that might have been part and parcel with the time that we were at, but having spoken to other people, I think we've gleaned that was... because a lot of our kids are all around about the same age, so most of us would have been looking for those that got it early.
I was going to say, like, I know, like, when I first talked to my partner about our oldest, he was 4 when he got diagnosed. Our stepdaughter, she's 6, and that's her just been diagnosed. And then our youngest, he is currently 3.5, and very much so, like, he's on that journey, but we haven't got anywhere near the assessment yet, so it could be around about the same time frame as when our daughter was given it. So I think very much our oldest was very similar to Elijah, in the sense that from a young age it would, they were quite apprehensive about giving that diagnosis, but it was one of those, I think he was 4, they basically turned around and were like, listen, he's autistic.
Yeah. And what age was Elijah?
So as I say, like, we started all the diagnosis from like 2, definitely, I think, from really, but I don't think he got his full diagnosis until roughly about 3ish, I don't think.
Yeah, so Ashton was the same. Ashton was 3 when he got his diagnosis, but it was quite quick process. It was only once we had that kind of initial call where they said autism sort of thing. It was only a few months after that we had a meeting with. They kind of explained that I had to be able to kind of triangle for the kind of diagnosis. I think it's like the community nurse, or the paediatrician, and like speech and language therapy. So it was only a few months later, when he was 3. I can still tell, I think it's obviously what you were saying as well, like the actual diagnosis part wasn't the nicest sort of thing. I just remember going into a room and we were kind of told that you sit in the chairs kind of at the back, don't intervene while they're all just observing Ashton, and Ashton was in a great mood sort of thing, but I think what it was one of these ball games that would go down a kind of big tube and come out different things, and Ashton was loving playing with it, but then what they would do is they would try and kind of essentially try push his buttons and see how he'd react, and it was like, right, no, you take this ball, not only this ball, and he would be getting really more upset, and he'd be coming over to us and we wouldn't be allowed to intervene, and you would just see him getting more and more upset, and then me and Cheryl would be getting more upset just trying to watch, and then they'd be just trying to do different things, kind of trying to kind of shout instructions at him or shouting his name for his response, and it was that way where you could just kind of see him essentially what was almost kind of like failing into a diagnosis essentially from there, which is really hard to take, I think, at that point, and I think that's what you said to you, Sam, when you were saying about the diagnosis. I think it's one of these ones where it's kind of like a bittersweet thing, where it's like you're glad that they've got the diagnosis so they can get the kind of a greater understanding, kind of what's going to help. They're not going to just kind of get classified as the kind of troublemakers or anything like that. You get that greater understanding, but there's still that kind of small kind of bit in the back of your head where you do have that kind of small sadness sort of thing. And
for sure, I think anybody, I think any parent of a child with additional support needs, I think, and it's something we spoke about very early on in the podcast, is you kind of, I think for me, you picture a life, you picture your kids' lives, you picture what you're going to do with them, you picture, you go into kind of over planning, and it's like the most silly things that you over plan, but in your head you're like, well, when they're 5, when they're 10, what's life going to look like? And I don't think you can't imagine a scenario like that, if that makes sense, not in a bad way or anything like that, but I think when you picture what your children's lives are going to be like, I know that's something I really kind of I really struggled with at first, with our oldest, because I knew he had that diagnosis, but I don't think I think for me, I didn't have it in my head that he was going to be facing kind of more adversity almost. He was going to have
kind of high level of support needs,
high level of support, and he was going to have any sort of real struggles. I think I very much had it in my head that hopefully one day he would have the skills necessary to live on his own or something like that. And then probably very recently when we found out, no matter where you are in the diagnostic journey, you find new things out all the time. We found out that our oldest, it's not a learning difficulty, it's a learning disability, which I'll be honest, I didn't even know there was a difference in that, but we found out that his capacity for learning is very limited, so there's going to be a stage where his brain will just be like, nah, we're not learning anything more. And you know, with him being out of school at the moment, that's obviously a big stress for both me and his mum, that we're sitting there going, well, we need to get him in, we need to get him learning, because if he is on a time frame, you know, he needs to be learning like the most common, the most core things.
I don't know about you, I can't remember what it was. I'm sure when Ashton got his autism diagnosis was also, I can't remember what it was. It was like it wasn't classed as learning disability then, but it was like I can't remember what it was. Whether it was, it's going to come back to me straight after this. It was like whether it was learning delay, like you said, or if it was there was a.
I think it was like a global delay.
Yeah, global development delay.
Global development delay.
Yeah, that. So there's that plus the autism. Because we actually got, the day that Ashton was in getting tested, we got the diagnosis that day, because I can remember kind of coming out to the car with Cheryl and Ashton, just being like, well, that's Ashton got his autism diagnosis. And how did you find it in terms of like, after you got the diagnosis, like, okay, you've got the diagnosis, like, now what? Like, what's different? Like, what support? What, like?
Yeah, I think it was a full research mode sort of thing. Like, once everything had kind of settled, and like, because I remember straight afterwards, there was a big lull period, obviously, where we didn't really know what to do or say to each other. I remember like Jade getting very emotional one night, just thinking about it all, because you've gone from, we know in life, obviously, you raise your kids, they go on, and they live their life on their own afterwards, obviously, but we are very under the understanding that Elijah's probably going to be with us now for the rest of his life. And that's, so, as you say, you expect them to grow, to learn, to live on their own, but that's not the life that's going to have for him now. So I think you kind of take a redirection for that. But Jade, being Jade, she went full research mode. She learned everything she could. She took on as much as she could to try and to better herself. And I do the same, and obviously we had a lot of conversations about these things. I think where we struggled the most was similar to yourself, obviously going to these meetings and these sessions with doctors and stuff where we couldn't interact. And they were just kind of upset about them, and they kind of just got the kids upset essentially on purpose, which is hard to say. I think the worst one for us was speech and language.
Okay.
So obviously Elijah had selective language. Obviously I've talked before about the fact that obviously he was great with his alphabet, loved his numbers, obviously taught himself other languages, but had no functional like speech for you. And I remember us going to several speech and language appointments at our local GP, and they were using the PEC boards.
Okay.
But whenever we were in the sessions, obviously we found like it felt like she was trying to train a dog.
Yeah.
And Jade got very emotional about this, and obviously we essentially quit speech and language very quickly because of it, because we just didn't feel like that was how he was going to learn. Obviously we tried to make it different. We tried to use our own pictures. We tried to use like his own toys, but it was all very much just kind of poking and prodding him, like, what's this? Like, can you tell me what this is? And just like slamming a hand down on the table. Like, it's like, it was very hard to watch, and especially watching Jade trying to watch it. Yeah. Without her trying to like intervene in any way. Yeah, it's probably one of the harder points of it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, that's the thing, we didn't really have speech and language in person until later on. So we had speech and language therapy. It had been during COVID. It was strange because this was, I'm sure it was before his diagnosis, but it was that weird that, again, because Ashton had lost his speech, so we're trying to get it back. And it was strange, 'cause I don't really know what I was expecting at first, but it was that way where Ashton was never on the calls. It was always a case of me and Cheryl, I can't remember the woman's name, but it was always a case of we had to take some videos of Ashton, different interactions, send them over, she would get it, and she'd basically come back to us and say, this is what you have to try. And it was very much, one of the things that always stuck with us was kind of don't just kind of barge your way into playing with them, wait until just kind of be next to them and get them to kind of invite you into their play, invite you into their world sort of thing, and it kind of opens up a lot more things. Essentially the whole thing of don't try and force it. And it wasn't until we kind of moved house, and I think this was obviously where kind of some of the kind of autistic tendencies had kind of started with Ashton, where he started to pick, so he lost all that functional language, like the mum, dad, hi, bye, all that sort of stuff, and he started to pick it up with things, a fascination with like letters and numbers, and he was loving that sort of things, and then just like repeating like nursery rhymes. So obviously at that point we were delighted that you had any sort of speech again at this point, and again we've got all these videos of Ashton. It started off with just grunts that sound like words, and we're like, he's speaking. You're just delighted that there's anything coming back there at all. But we went to the kind of NHS speech and language run as well, and to be fair, again, it almost felt like just kind of like a box ticking exercise at that point for us, because again you needed the kind of 3 sides for the diagnosis. Ashton just went in and played with the toys. There wasn't really much kind of speech and language therapy going on, it felt, at that point, and I think it's difficult because I think you do get to that point, and we were the same with in terms of like the health visitor. Once Ashton was kind of on that journey, it kind of felt like we were past the point where having his height measured and his weight taken, it just kind of felt irrelevant at that point, because you're hoping that you can after that you're going to see some sort of specialist doctor who's going to come and fix everything, and someone that's going to tell you exactly what to do. But obviously the difficult thing is there's not really the magic person out there that
No,
can
there's
do it
not,
all.
no.
Was it me and my partner, we say it all the time, is, you know, being a parent, there's no instruction manual, you know, and a lot, you know, being, you know, was it neurotypical children, you know, is, I would say, a lot more common, so you've got a lot more experiences to understand, you know, and a lot of parents who have neurotypical children, they can commune, and you know, if their child's struggling, they can reach that kind of compromise, and you know, with our children, that's a very difficult task, you know, and I think for you know, I think it's really difficult, you know. I think seeing my stepdaughter grow up, I think it was a wee bit. I met her, like I said, when she was 1.5, and I think I see things now that I have my son. You know, I love them all equally, and I will treat them all the same way. But I think going through it, it's, you know, it is different, you know, and seeing, you know, my stepdaughter, and she's thriving now where she is. We moved her school because they couldn't, like, just the needs that not only her but the entire class had, and that it was just, they were all really struggling, and the teacher was going off and on and off and on, and it was just, there was a lot of kind of inconsistency which, you know, she really struggled with. But we moved her school, and she's doing really well. She's got a teacher who's very invested, who's very knowledgeable about, you know, additional support needs and stuff like that, and he's doing a fantastic job. I think where we are, I look at it and I go, you know, she is autistic, but for me, she's still her. You know, it is just a, you know, it is, I don't want to call it a label, but it is, you know, that is what she falls under this umbrella of an additional support need. She just needs a bit of extra help. And, you know, I look at it and I go, she can still, you know, grow up, work, get married, all of these types of things. And I think it's a wee bit different, because when I looked at my oldest, you know, I think I had to very much resign to the fact that probably won't happen, you know. And I think kind of similarly, we talked about, you know, is he going to stay with us for, you know, until we're older? And I know me and my partner had a conversation about that, and it was very much like, listen, our goal hopefully is to get him into maybe assisted living once he's old enough. Yeah.
I mean, my cousin, which I spoke about earlier, obviously his needs are similar to Elijah's in many ways. I'd say he's definitely more functional with his speech. Obviously, he's had his own little job, like he works in charity shops, and he does live on his own. Essentially, he went to college to learn farming of all things. So
it's a good area.
Yeah,
culture. Yeah.
It's a thing from when he was like, we used to go on holidays to Wales, and the family friends owned a farm.
Right. Okay.
So he would go out into the fields with his family friend and do other things. So that's how he got interested in it. So not every child with additional needs or with autism is going to have the same journey as we've spoke about.
100%.
There's kids out there that can function still, and they are high functioning, and they can still go out into the world and can have high powered jobs. They can live lives, and this is something that our children can have as well. Still,
Yeah, absolutely.
My best friend down in Birmingham, he had a daughter around about the same time as us. They got pregnant just before us, and because Elijah was early, he actually came a day before.
Wow.
His daughter did. It was quite hilarious, obviously, because I was in the room after Elijah come, and I'm like, we beat you. But she's going down her own pathway. She's a lot more high functioning. Obviously, she has speech. She always has her speech. Obviously, she's potty trained. Obviously, she knows her own mind. But she's difficult in her own ways. And she has her own development that she's working on. So it's weird seeing that there's differences, and you don't want to weigh up compare the kids and stuff like that, obviously, but you do see it.
I think it's a natural thing as a parent as well to compare, and it's not something you ever want to do, but no. You'll see, I know that if we go to a soft play, for example, and I sit there and you see children run around and invite other children to play and do all of these things, and I think it took me a long time to be able to turn around and go, that doesn't matter. I'm here, I'm focusing on my child. This is how my child is, exuding energy, getting a lot of the kind of thoughts and feelings out through play. And I know that when we go to different soft plays, it'll be, it'll be like a trampoline, or it's like a circular swing that he'll just spend his entire time on, and you sit there and go, do you know what, if that makes you happy, doing that for a few hours, bash in, keep you happy.
Definitely. I think just in terms of kind of going back to the kind of diagnosis sort of thing, I know we've kind of covered how we've all felt about our kind of early signs and how the actual journeys went itself, and we've just obviously touched on kind of what happens next. Is there any sort of kind of, we spoke about speech and language, is there any other services that you guys kind of used or anything, or things that you found kind of after that initial diagnosis that you just kind of went to? I mean, I give an example, like for Ashton, we get referred to the Scottish Centre for Autism to work with Ashton, and that was in terms of he was going there and that was supposed to help him with his kind of turn taking to get him in that. So obviously we highlight as well the kind of diagnosis process, that none of our kids are kind of like it when someone else takes control. They want to be very much in charge of what's going on, because that's just kind of the way that
it's their world, we're living in it.
Exactly. So and they worked with Ashton for nearly a year in terms of turn taking, be like, right, Ashton's turn, right, my turn, Ashton's turn, and there was meltdowns, everything in between sort of thing, but it was just good to know that there was something there that would work in that. It was even dealing with kind of obsessions and things where they would bring specific toys, and then because he would remember certain toys from the previous week, he'd want the same one, so he'd have to mix it up, and it was almost that kind of expanding on the diagnosis to try and help him kind of be around others and help him work, and we found that absolutely brilliant. Ashton was only supposed to be on that for, I'm sure, about 6 weeks or so, and they ended up keeping him in there for a year before the service shut down completely, I think. So that was absolutely brilliant for us. I was just wondering if there's anything that
I don't remember anything like that for Elijah. I know we had like Zoom calls and like calls obviously similar to yourself where we'd have to do things and send them videos and such. I think that was more the community nurse. We did have to follow up a couple of times with dietitians because Elijah's his eating hasn't always been as good as it is, and it does fluctuate. I made a comment the other day. Realistically, he'll eat as much as he likes, obviously, but he'll at some point he just doesn't want to eat at all. Like in the last podcast, I said obviously that his palate is really good. He'll eat what he eats, obviously, but he mostly snacks. Since then, he hasn't wanted to eat dinner. We've started looking at trying to give him his dinner earlier now, because when he comes off the bus, we tend to just give him a snack plate. So instead of giving him that snack plate, we're giving him a dinner.
Yeah, the same way, Ashton.
And then giving him something else later in case he doesn't eat it. It's even like his breakfast. He's only eating certain breakfast foods now. He's gone completely off toast. But if I give him a pan of chocolate or if I give him a croissant, he'll just...
That's exactly the same as Ashton. So Ashton used to love toast all the time. Then all of a sudden, if you show him toast now, he'll be sick. And now he has a croissant most of the time now.
Yeah.
How was it? Our oldest, he's got a process he follows, and if it's not spot on, he will not be happy. So, what is it? He always says in the morning he wakes up, and sometimes he wants a snack in the morning just until he's fully woken up. If he's had melatonin the night before, he basically he can be quite groggy in the morning. So a lot of the time we will just kind of let him dictate. You know, he comes up and asks for a snack, or he'll say toast and spoon, which means cereal. So it'll be cereal with toast, and if it'll be a certain. So he'll walk into the kitchen, he'll point to 1 or 2 or 3 different boxes of cereal that he wants in one go. You know, I remember that used to be an absolute foreign concept to me. I was always a one cereal type of guy.
Oh, I did that when I was younger as well.
But, you know, he very much, at the moment, his choices is chocolate Weetabix and frosted Shreddies. That's his 2 niche ones that he likes to put together. He has his cereal, and then he has normally toast and chocolate spread. And what he will do is he will scoop out the cereal once it's been soaked in the milk for a wee bit, so it's a bit more mushy. He will then dip his toast in the milk, and then the remainder milk he'll take and put into the sink because he no longer needs that anymore. So he's got like a strict process, in his head, and it's the same with lunch, it's the same with dinner. You know, he has that strict process, but I think his palate is it can be really hit and miss at the moment. He's, chicken dippers, smoked sausage, anything for, McDonald's is always a staple. Anything that isn't that, though, he will not even go near it. And I think services wise, what you were talking about there, I know at the moment, just with him being out of school, we are looking at, we found out that if your child's like not in school, you can get like music therapy, like play therapy and stuff like that to come out to the house and do like little workshops.
Good.
So we're in the process of trying to get that set up. As for like speech and language, for us, the way they have described our oldest is, if you say a phrase that he's not quite familiar with, it's like a tombola in his head with all saved phrases, and he'll just roll the tombola, and whatever comes out he'll try and piece into the sentence. If it works, great. If not, that's when frustration kicks in. That is very much where they've turned around and went, so you have to try and let him kind of figure it out, and you have to really be patient with it. And I know I struggled with that because I was, in my head, I was like, this sentence, we've talked about it before, why is it not, sinking in? But it takes them a wee bit extra time. So as much, I think the services after diagnosis not only is for them, I think it's for us as well, to understand, to step into their lives a bit and get to know them that wee bit more. And it can be difficult because, like you said, some of the services and like even the diagnostic assessment, it can be absolutely brutal to sit there and watch. But at the end of the day, if it's gonna, you have to look at it and go, is this going to benefit my child? Is this going to get my child more things to help them out? Then
they have to do it. They don't want it to kind of step between. But sorry, I'd cut you off, Glyn, about you were saying about the dietitian in terms of Elijah. You're saying, obviously, did you manage to get any sort of help with that? Like, what was the sort of stuff that
we did bits and pieces, obviously, and they told us to keep like a diary of what he was eating and what foods had been the case. safety food's always been a priority for us in the house. Just trying to find what we could. Jade used to make a lot of things herself to try and push through what we could find. Obviously, as I said, it's always been good with veg, which has always been a positive. Watermelon is an absolute staple in our house. We can go through a pack of watermelon in a day.
Wow.
But that used to be a case of that would be the only way we could get fluid into him as well.
Okay.
Because he wouldn't. He still doesn't really do it, but he wouldn't drink out of like a cup. Because if you give him a cup, it's pulled straight out.
Uh-huh.
So for the most part, we still use like sippy cups.
Okay.
We've started to be able to transition into some more sports bottles for school. But even then, like when he was at nursery and stuff, they were like, okay, so we only offer water. And we're like, he's not going to drink water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like it needs to be like diluted squash or it's milk. Even now, like he won't drink milk as much. The only time we give him milk is to have his melatonin in the evening.
Yeah.
Or if we have to give him some sort of medicine, because we can't ever give Elijah any medicine.
Is it a liquid
orally.
form of melatonin?
Yeah, liquid. We had the pills to begin with, but we pushed to get the liquid because the pills just weren't doing anything for him.
Right.
We'd give them to him, and then he'd be up like midway through the night again. But I think, obviously we didn't get as much as we'd hoped for speech and language, but we just kind of found our own way with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I think that's certainly something that we kind of had to understand is like all of these different departments, they can offer you suggestions, but it's, our children are all so different, so it is just what works and what doesn't. It's very trial and error, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know that our daughter, she really struggles to remember to drink, so she can go like a full day without touching a juice cup if she forgets.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done some work with the dietitian about how trying to introduce bottles of flavoured water or something like that with every meal, or even every couple of snacks, reminding her to drink and stuff like that.
Elijah got better with fruit shoots. I think that was a good thing for us.
We can burn through a pallet of fruit shoots in a day in our house. Yeah,
won't touch fizzy juice. Which is always funny if you do, because we'll have a bottle of something and he'll try it and it's just his face crunched up straight away as soon as it touches his mouth. Andy, you spoke about testing and for the diagnosis as well a couple of times. Obviously, you touched on there for a diagnosis as well. I know you said you wanted to talk about it a bit more.
Yeah. So after Ashton got his autism diagnosis, we got offered genetic testing, and just after that point, Ashton had just literally been out of the hospital and got a good few rounds of blood, so we had said to them like it's something that we definitely want to look into, but we'd rather wait just now because he's just been kind of poked and prodded as it is. Can we wait until he's going to be inevitably in hospital again to do that? And we're like, that's fine. So it kind of got passed down the road, and then we were kind of waiting for the next time he'd be in hospital. And little do we know that the next time he'd be in hospital would be when I had essentially not put the handbrake on the car, and it essentially kind of rolled down our driveway and hit into Ashton, which was the most horrific moment ever. I just burst into tears. I had no idea kind of what I had done or anything. It had hit Ashton, it had hit Cheryl, and at that moment everything just kind of flashed before my eyes. I was like, what have I done? Like, is he still alive? Is he paralysed? And that's where the kind of communication thing, he couldn't tell us what it was. Ashton was crying, but it was that way. Is it just because I was crying, everyone was upset, and immediately kind of rushed him into hospital, and kind of give everyone their dues in hospital. And A&E, they had a full trauma team, about 10 different doctors for all the different issues that it could be. And as soon as they found out that he was autistic, one of them took charge and was like, right, everyone step back, one at a time, go up to him, sort of thing. And they couldn't have done better. But as I say, it's easy to tell the story now because thankfully everything was absolutely fine. But the kind of one positive from that was that we managed to get bloods taken when we were in there, and then it was a while later that Cheryl got the phone call to essentially say that Ashton has something called Fragile X syndrome, like I said before. And again, it was one of these ones where it was essentially like a kind of a punch to the gut, because we hadn't realised that there could be something else that could kind of affect him. But I think in terms of the genetic testing, it's so important because it's something that's helped us understand Ashton even more. We obviously said the kind of bittersweetness of the initial autism diagnosis, but it can kind of help you understand your child's better. It's kind of guided our kind of medical options a lot more for Ashton in terms of highlighting things that could potential epilepsy, kind of hearing problems, there can be heart problems, and this is something that we wouldn't have had any idea about if it wasn't for the genetic testing. It's kind of uncovered family history of where it's came from, co-occurring risks that I mentioned there as well, such as obviously the epilepsy and things like that, and some kind of physical features, but and it's just something we had never heard of at all. Even the fact that it's kind of 1 in 20 cases of autism are caused by Fragile X syndrome. It's helped us in terms of opening up options. The fact that this can be diagnosed by a blood test, checking the DNA to say, okay, Ashton has Fragile X syndrome, that's what's causing this. And it also means that if we were looking to extend a family sort of thing, we have the option of doing IVF to kind of isolate the gene sort of thing. So the kind of open options up there for us. So yeah, it's something that's been massively important for us to kind of help understand Ashton a bit more.
You know, I think like kind of what we were talking about, I know you guys have talked about it in the past, obviously looking at like genetics and stuff like that, and that's something that's been big for us. I'm quite an analytical person, so I like to look at like the assessment they done for his learning disability. You know, they very much placed him in having, you know, he's 9 years old in the body of a 14-year-old, you know, with the kind of mental capacity at the moment of like a 1 to 3 month old.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that I find that like it's incredible, you know. And I think it's one of those that you look at it and go, wow, you know. And it's almost kind of changed the way I look at a lot of things, because there's so many times where I would get frustrated, you know, if he's doing the same thing over and over again, and I go, well, you know, if he is, you know, 1 to 3 months in his brain, you know, there's 1 to 3 month olds do the same thing, mm-hmm. you know, and they will, you know, that's how they will act.
Yeah, you
know, and it's one of those. It can be really confusing, but at the same time, like you said, you're doing so much research.
Yeah.
You know, something genetically we were looking at as well was our youngest. What happened for him was once he started growing up, his head, I can't believe it, sounds really weird when I'm saying this, his head grew very quickly,
mm-hmm.
Right.
and the rest of his body didn't.
Okay.
You know, so much so that the doctors actually thought he had is it hydrocephalus.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I can't remember the name of the doctor who looked at him, but very much looked at my son, looked at me, looked at my son, looked at me, and went, "Dad, you have a big head, don't you?" And I went, "Mm-hmm." And he measured them both, and he went, "There's a good chance that he's just got a big head." And I was like, "Okay, well, that makes me feel slightly better."
That's
slightly identified, you
genetics
know,
and
having
all
a
that.
big noggin, but I find that very interesting, like kind of genetically seeing my stepchildren as well, you know, seeing how they are developing as individuals as well.
I think that was a weird one for us for the testing, because like we now know that Jade also has we've gone for an autism and ADHD diagnosis with Jade. We had to do it privately,
okay,
because the wait list for a woman of her age to try and get those is stupid long.
Yeah.
So she has her ADHD diagnosis now, and we're pushing for an autism one through the NHS,
mm-hmm.
just because she needed it for work,
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of help with some of her like work-life balance sort of stuff.
Because it impacts everything.
Yeah. But it didn't pop up. Obviously, we had to have bloods taken. Obviously, you know for yourself, obviously, for the genetic testing. And it never came up that she had any sort of gene for it, or like it was anything for myself. It just came back as inconclusive.
I think a lot of the time it can be that, because I think with a lot of the times the genetic testing, they're testing for like known, like for example, like the Fragile X, that's the most common inherited cause, but it could be something like there could be a gene between Jade and Elijah that's just not named
absolutely,
anything. Yeah.
I think we're in a very, I don't want to say fortunate, but we're in a very, you know, advanced medical world now that, you know, they're picking up things that were missed
Yeah.
many moons ago, and it's certainly something that me and my partner talk about is, do we have autistic tendencies? And I, for sure, I'm 100% on the spectrum somewhere.
You get it by proxy sometimes. I know I've picked up like
Mirroring them.
mirroring it sometimes with the kids.
Yeah, I it's one of those that I certainly thought, eventually I would like to go down the NHS route of finding out if I have ADHD or autism or anything like that. But like you were saying, the wait times is something that I think at the moment in my life would just add on kind of extra stress that I don't need.
Something to put in the back burner for a while.
Yeah, I think wait lists, it can be really difficult, but it's good that obviously Jade's going down that route, and hopefully she heals.
It's a self diagnosis thing for herself as well. Obviously, it was one of those we'd gone through the process with Elijah. And this is me.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, it just never clicked.
Mm-hmm.
But that might be a conversation that we have for another episode, I think.
Yeah,
Definitely, yeah.
So we've said that we want to shout out places that we use constantly. Obviously, we are based in Glasgow, so a lot of these are going to be Glasgow and the surrounding area based. But the first one we want to talk about is Pop In and Play. We're currently doing a competition that should have finished, I believe, by the time this comes out.
By the time whoever it is that's listening to this, it should already have been drawn.
Excellent.
Oh, there you go. I've never been to Pop In and Play, so
It's
anybody got
it
anything?
is brilliant.
It's an amazing
Tell
little
me
place.
about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different rooms in there. So you go in, there's a room at the back, it's trampolines, a lot of different sensory toys. There's a swing at the back. There's rooms with ball pits. There's you can kind of go on. There's a room upstairs with a projector. I think there's a new construction room.
Yeah, she just changed one of the rooms for construction room. Obviously, they've got a flashing a signal light. And building blocks and whatnot, but they're open from 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. pretty much every day. It's £25 for an hour and £40 for 2 hours, which in this day and age is pretty good for it.
Yeah, and it's good for parents. Obviously, you've got that exclusive hire, so if you want, you can go and get it for yourself. You go with other parents. So I think you have the kind of full place to yourself.
Yeah,
there should be something for everyone in there.
and it's not like you're going for a soft play where you're going to have people that are going to walk in. Like you say, it is a private hire. So if you're hiring it, it's just yourself.
Oh, okay.
And the staff there are really nice. They don't linger around unless they've got something they're on. But for the most part, they will they'll leave you to it. They'll head out. They just ask you to let them know when you're leaving, just to keep yourself tidy with it as well. But it's definitely worth a look, especially for if you're taking all three kids or if you're going to take a group. I know Jay tends to use it when I'm working, so it tends to be like her break up during the day. Takes the kids for a couple of hours, and they just get to explore. And it's locked away.
Yeah, it's completely secure, so you don't have to worry about anything like that. There's facilities in there. I know that I'm sure she just ordered a hoist and everything as well, so it's just kind of catered for all different kind of capabilities in there. So yeah, definitely a place to check out. So that's Pop In and Play. Each episode, what we'll do is we'll try and kind of shed some light on different places that we enjoy, and hopefully you guys can try to get some good use out of it. If there's anywhere that you enjoy going, reach out to us and we can take a look into it. But I think for this week we will go there. So yeah, thank you very much everyone for listening.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, thank you.
Right, thank you. Bye now. Thanks for listening. If you want to get involved or get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook or Instagram under ASN Dad Chat.